Do you know how you know who you really are? It's not your philosophy or your politics or any of that stupid bullshit. It's how you immediately react to something completely unexpected. One day I walked outside, and for whatever reason, the Goodyear blimp was flying above my house, which is statistically unlikely in and of itself. But for a moment, it's for the tiniest little moment, I thought it was a flying saucer. I thought it was an alien spacecraft. You don't be used to seeing blimps flying around. Not a normal everyday sight. And so, you walk out, you see this big object hovering in the sky, and it's like, oh, is E.T. come home? And my immediate reaction when I thought for that split second that I was looking at a UFO was, oh, thank God, they're finally here. And I didn't care if they were here to save us, like the aliens from the day the earth stood still, or if they were here to destroy us like the aliens from Independence Day. That did not matter. All that mattered was that this world was over. But then, of course, it was just the Goodyear blimp. But in that precious half second, when I thought I was looking at a alien spaceship, a ship of extraterrestrial origin, when I thought the world as I knew it was over and done with, I was so deeply and powerfully relieved. Sometimes you just don't know what you're carrying until you finally have permission to drop it. It's not that I don't like this world. I actually do, despite all my complaining. But I like it in the same way I like the 1988 film Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Like, I know it's not actually good in any defensible way, but there's just something about its badness that works for me. Know me? For one thing, all my stuff is here. My people, my pets, my material things. It's hard to fully hate a place when there's stuff you like there. But it also has a lot of stuff I don't like, if I'm being honest with you. And I could get into the heavy stuff here, war and corruption and brutality and famine and plague and But that's not really the stuff that gets to me at the end of the day. If I'm honest with myself, I'm not really that lofty. The stuff I hate is more banal, more pedestrian. People who get in my way when I'm walking or driving somewhere. I'm not talking about abstract obstacles Oh, they're in the way of my ambition or some nonsense like that. I'm talking about people who are just physically impeding my path. I detest an obstacle, especially one that should have the good sense to get the fuck out of the way. Having to pay for things. Whoever thought that one up is a real putz, in my opinion. Do I have a better idea? No. But I feel like someone else should have come up with something by now. For fuck's sake. Cigarettes being unhealthy. That's a big grievance for me. Why do they have to be so pleasant to smoke? So wonderfully addictive? If they're just going to make me cough my guts out every so often and end up giving me cancer or emphysema or both. It's not fair. It's not fair. But even in those things, I can be the optimist. I can find the silver lining. I might, hate that idiot that gets in my way, but I kind of love hating them. Kind of love cursing them. Kind of love feeling superior to them, I hate paying for things, but I am a well-trained consumer in a capitalist economy, so I do get a little dopamine hit every time I buy something. And I hate that cigarettes are bad for me, but I do have to admit the danger of them makes them a little bit sexier, My wife denied that one time. I told her, smoking's cool. One of my very rational defenses of my bad habit. Smoking's cool, though. And she said it's not cool. And I prodded her to admit that, yes, it is cool. And she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't do it. She denied it up and down. But then one day, we were driving through town, and we saw a young man walking across the street, crossing at the crosswalk. He had a guitar on his back, greasy locks of curly hair, real intense expression on his face, that kind of guy. And he's smoking a cigarette, and I said, whoa, that guy's cool. And Chelsea said, yeah, with his guitar and his cigarettes. Ooh, yeah. And I thought, I see. Now, maybe it's just the case that guy looked cooler than me in general. Well, he did. That's just true. But the way she said cigarettes with such reverence let me know unequivocally that she does in fact think cigarettes are cool. She lied to me. It was a beneficent lie, a lie designed to get me to quit smoking, which is a good thing. It didn't work, of course. I mean, I don't really, at the end of the day, smoke cigarettes so that my wife thinks I'm cool. I smoke them because I like them. And I like them because they combine some of my favorite activities. Burning things, sucking things, and doing something unhealthy. A lot of my favorite stuff. But now, I've reached the point in my rant, and we'll reach this point many times, where I don't quite know what the subject is anymore. Am I talking about aliens? Am I talking about the world? Am I talking about cigarettes? A world of alien cigarettes. A cigarette of alien worlds. Why not? But let's refocus. or, I don't know, focus for the first time, whatever the case may be. Let's do it by restating the premise from earlier. I think that's important. What was the premise from earlier? Maybe I can avoid derailment this time if I can just find my way back there. All right. I go outside. I see the Goodyear blimp. I think it's a UFO for like half a second. And in that half second, I'm relieved. Is that the relief face? Is that the face of fucking relief? Okay. But I feel relieved because the world is one way or another, it's ending. And that's a pleasing thought. It's a relaxing thought. Why should it be, though? You know, I already told you I don't hate this world, so why should it be such a relief to think it's coming to an end? Because while I do enjoy this world in some sort of, ironic, detached, so bad it's good kind of way, I do think there probably are other configurations of reality that I might like a little better. You know? The reality where Michael Rennie shows up in a flying saucer with a giant robot and tells humanity to get its shit together. I don't know, that might be a nice change of pace. Don't you think? I think it could be. Or even if the aliens are just here to harvest our skin and turn our brains into little nodes in the infinite suffering dodecahedron that's going to fly off into space to drift for all eternity while our minds scream in eternal agony. Even that, I don't know, might be interesting, right? A little bit. If nothing else, maybe it'll make us appreciate what we had. Who knows? I wonder if I'm heading towards any kind of point here. I'd be shocked if I was. I could try to make the lesson here something like, you don't know what you got till it's gone. But that's a little too Counting Crows for my liking. You know, and if I'm honest with you, and this is maybe a different subject for a different time, but parking lots are actually more useful than paradise. And paradise is kind of overrated, at least the paradise they're talking about. And if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, if you're totally lost, you don't get this reference at all, you should be glad, because that song sucks. You know? You don't know. I guess the initial premise here was that you get to know yourself best when you're met with the unexpected. Because I believe firmly, and this is, I don't really believe a lot of things firmly. I might use that piece of rhetoric here and there. I firmly believe. But this is actually true. I really do firmly believe this. And there aren't many things I firmly believe. Most of my beliefs are flighty, interchangeable nonsense. But this one I firmly believe. I believe that no one really knows what they would do in a crazy situation until they arrive at that moment. You know? You walk into a room. Your best friend is standing over a corpse holding a knife. He's like, dude, you gotta help me. I just killed this guy. And you probably have some idea in your head about what you would do. But you want to know what? I don't believe you. I don't. In fact, whatever your answer is, I would bet my life that you do the opposite. So if you would tell me to my face, I would turn them in. It's the right thing to do. I think you'd help them. And if you tell me, whatever, man, fuck the system, I'm helping my buddy out, I think you'd turn them in. Yeah. That's just my experience with you creatures. You humans. You're all the opposite of what you pretend to be. You're all in perpetual rebellion against yourselves. You're all trying to convince the world that you're what you're not. Uh-oh. I just realized I've slipped into this voice where I'm talking about humanity from an outside perspective. Like I'm not part of it. One of my oldest defense mechanisms, actually. I remember being a teenager, walking through the halls at school, looking at my classmates and thinking, I am not one of you. I am something ancient, something powerful, something your little insect minds could never comprehend. I am beyond you. An old coping mechanism of mine. What am I even coping with there? I don't know. Being human, I suppose. That's what it is. Being disgustingly, tiringly, tediously, pathetically human. Maybe that's a hint to some of the relief I felt when I thought the aliens had come. You know? Maybe I thought to myself a few layers deep that I might find kinship with the aliens, you know? Kinship I struggle to find with my fellow human beings sometimes. You know what I mean? Maybe the aliens would see the world more like I do. Maybe they'd say to me, TJ, what are you doing here among these vermin? They are your lessers. They are your inferiors. Join us and explore the cosmos. And I'd say, no thanks. That sounds scary. But it's very validating that you asked me. Thank you, aliens. Let's drift back to the premise for a moment, though. The idea that you don't know who you are until you're faced with something unexpected. Let's consider the ramifications of that idea. If that idea is true, then it means that the reflexive self is truer than the constructed self. Okay? Now, according to modern neuroscience, the self itself, which is kind of a strange turn of phrase, the self itself, the self itself, the self itself, the self itself. The self itself is nothing more than a post hoc rationalization. In other words, it's just a narrative that the brain is telling itself to explain why it did what it did. And it doesn't necessarily prioritize accuracy in those explanations, just coherence, right? I guess that's good evidence for the idea that the reflexive self is the truer self because it hasn't yet had time to lie to you. You know? It hasn't had times to run things through the filter of all the bullshit that you think is you, like your philosophy and your morality and your spirituality and your politics and your self-image and your little excuses and justifications. your rationalizations and cultural influences and your instilled values and your adopted values and your learned lessons and your traumas, and your aspirations and your fears and your fantasies and your fucking illusions of some kind of internal consistency, your endless little litany of whatevers. All the stuff that you think makes you you. The reflexive self ain't worried about none of that. It's just immediate. Uh-oh, an unexpected stimuli. What do we do? This. Immediate action. Now, when it comes to mundane things you've dealt with many times before, you've had a chance to build up your little, countermeasures against the reflexive self. Your little acts of rebellion against the true you. Your subversions of your instincts. You learn to override that little first impulse, to conform yourself to the expectations of your constructed identity. And the expectations of society, whatever that might be to you. Because society is not one big homogenous thing. It's different depending on where you are and your family and your income level and so on and so forth. But when some sort of black swan event comes along, something that blindsides you, something so far outside the normal patterns of your life that the usual script doesn't load, all that conditioning, at least for a moment, kind of collapses, right? And for that moment, you get to know who you really are. Let's say a gunman targets your significant other. And you got a choice, and it's an immediate choice. Do you shield them with your own body? Or do you run? Or do you stand there shot? What do you do? Now, you might say, yes, I would shield them. You might say, no, I think I'm too cowardly. Whatever you'd say. You don't actually know. You don't actually know. Because the you that's answering the question is not the you that's going to actually make the decision when that moment comes. Something in you is hardwired to the core to be either the protector or the self-preserver. And that's going to be something primal, something you haven't had time or a chance to feed a script into. You're just going to act. And that's going to be a decision made by the real you, the one beneath all of your values. And I don't know about you guys, but I personally find that just a little bit terrifying. And I find it terrifying for a few reasons. First of all, I think that the idea that your real self is something that you're running from your whole life, something you don't have control over, something that when the chips are down is going to act in ways that you have no input in. I don't know. A little disturbing to me. But, I watch a lot of true crime. And one thing I hear a lot from a person who just murdered their best friend or their spouse or whoever is they say, I'm not that kind of person. And I think most viewers of the true crime stuff probably just think these people are lying, And to be fair, sometimes I think they are. But oftentimes, I think that they're just a human being that got blindsided by their own actions. And because they don't really understand what happened, they resort to that hackneyed phrase, oh, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not the kind of person that would do that, even after they've just done it. I think what they really mean is, I didn't know I was that kind of person until I found out. And I think that most of the time when they say that, it is sincere. I like the true crime videos, but I hate the comment sections of those videos because it's always just a bunch of moral clout farming. You know? Hand-wringing about how terrible the criminal is. And I view that as just another feeble form of rebellion against the true nature of humanity, the violent nature of humanity. These people in the comments section are all charged up with this condemnation for the man who bludgeoned his best friend with a wrench or whatever. But, you know, when it comes to endlessly justifying their tax dollars, you know, funding a genocide, or, you know, their dear leader wants to go blow up some so-called drug boats from Venezuela without trial or charge or any hint of due process or due diligence. It's like they're just mum. They don't give a shit. So some guy kills his wife. Some wife kills her husband. Oh my God, what a monster. Some dude in Washington decides to, you know, drone strike a birthday party, and it's like, oh, what are you going to do? Status quo, baby. Status quo. I'm reminded of the observations of two musicians that I like and enjoy. First, there's Maynard James Keenan. He wrote a song, and he's in like 20 bands. So this song is a Tool song. It's called Vicarious. And in the song Vicarious, he says, "'Cause I need to watch things die from a distance. Vicariously, I live while the whole world dies. You all need it too, don't lie." A sound observation, if ever I heard one. I'm also reminded of Marilyn Manson, my favorite rock star, musician, whatever you want to call him, artist. He wrote an essay in the wake of the Columbine massacre, which he was blamed for. He said, "The day that Cain bashed his brother Abel's brains in, the only motivation he needed was his own human disposition to violence. Whether you interpret the Bible as literature or as the final word of whatever God may be, Christianity has given us an image of death and sexuality that we have based our culture around." Now, both the song Vicarious and the Manson essay, Columbine, Whose Fault Is It?, are commenting on essentially the same cultural reflex. The desperate need to locate violence as somewhere else so that we don't have to recognize where it's coming from, which is within. For instance, look at how we talk as a culture about those who commit acts of violence and savagery and brutality. How many times have you seen the shocking story or the terrible video of the murderer that killed the woman or threw the baby on the train tracks or whatever the hell? And you see all these people and they say, they're a monster. They're an animal. They're a demon. They're everything under the sun, but human. We love to pseudo-speciate these violent individuals running amok in our society. We love to dehumanize these people. And that, to me, is one of the most outrageously dishonest pieces of rhetoric under the sun. We attempt to revoke the humanity of those who engage in violence and call them monsters and animals and demons and whatever else. But monsters ain't real. Demons are within, and we are animals. In fact, we are the most violent animals to ever exist, at least on this planet. Now, maybe your little intellectually dishonest word games can sidestep that fact when you're looking at the one little incident in isolation. Oh, the mean man did the bad thing. He's a bad man. But when you look at the totality of human history, it's a little harder, you know? Because it becomes clear that human beings and violence go together like cheese and crackers, baby. The story of the world's most dangerous primate contains many a blood-soaked chapter. Wars, too numerous to count, you know? Genocides, revolutions, pogroms, inquisitions, crusades, lynchings, executions and bombings, and illegal human experimentation. That's a fun one. Brutal prisons. Economic exploitation, which, don't kid yourself, kills tons of people. Manufactured famines, slavery, sexual assault. And let's not forget, sexual assault in many instances can be institutionalized. It's not always the guy that's hiding in the bushes. Sometimes it's the soldier at war who is given a little wink and a nudge to go terrorize the enemy. Sometimes it's just the de facto guards look the other way, punishment for people in prison. And each of these categories I lay out, by the way, they each have their own little legions of subcategories. It's not like any of those in and of themselves contain just one kind of horrible atrocity. There's plenty of atrocity to go around. Now, you think that in a world so full of violence, we might want a little reprieve from it in our entertainment. But no. Movies, books, TV shows, games. You name a storytelling medium and I'll find you some goddamn blood and guts. Even when the violence isn't graphic, it's still omnipresent. Take this superhero genre that was popular 5 minutes ago, right? Every one of those fucking movies, cities leveled, faceless hordes wantonly mowed down by these might makes right brutes, right? These tight-wearing chuckle fucks. Sometimes wearing American flags on their fucking bodies, you know? Dressed in colorful outfits, just bludgeoning people and cracking one-liners and funny little geek jokes while buildings full of people crumble to the damn ground and thousands die and children are orphaned and shit. But none of that's ever focused on. It's just, oh, well, it's just a beautiful spectacle. Spectacle of violence. You know, just because you don't see the intestines spilling out of someone's belly doesn't mean you aren't watching violence. There's different, in fact, in a lot of ways, the violence that doesn't show the blood and guts is kind of worse because it makes the violence seem sanitized and safe and family friendly. And look, I don't want to sound like I'm being, critical here of violence and entertainment. I'm not. I like watching Art the Clown take a chainsaw to the junk of a naked college dude and then make like blood angels, which is like snow angels but in blood, while cheerful Christmas music plays, I like to watch skulls get crushed, and I like arterial spatter, and eyes getting gouged out and shit. Whatever. It's good, clean, wholesome, all American entertainment, baby. But my point, at least for this moment, is this. We have a violent history. We have a violent history. We have a violent present. We have violent entertainment. So, how the fuck we ain't violent again? How the fuck you wringing your hands in the comments of the true crime video like, why would they do it? Because they're the most violent primate on the face of the damn earth, just like you. You mean to tell... You're watching it as entertainment. Right now. And you want to act like, I don't get it. Harumph. I am perplexed by this behavior. Bullshit. Bullshit, my friend. You are not. Why do we continue to act like when we see this violence, like it's some kind of aberration? Like, oh, we're shocked by this. No, you're not. I find it interesting, the violence we don't condemn, the violence that we justify. Typically, it's the violence engaged in by the state, That's the violence we all accept. Even if we oppose it, we don't condemn it with the same fervor. A man kills his neighbor, he's a monster. A president butchers thousands or even millions. And, people, he's a bad president. It's like the worst they'll say about him. That's bad policy. Even if they do decide to use more colorful language and say he's a monster, it never really has the same ring of fucking truth. Because I think we just accept it, Status quo. I think the one word you hear tossed around for presidents who are bloodthirsty demons is war criminal. They're a war criminal, which should, I think, be worse than a regular criminal. But if you judge based on how society treats the war criminal versus the regular criminal, it seems that we do think the regular criminal is worse. Not really sure how we came to that conclusion, but it appears by all reasonable metrics that we did. Like George W. Bush, he's responsible for mountains of dead, but he ain't rotting in a prison cell right now. He's off painting pictures of himself crying in the shower and being besties with Michelle Obama. Being trotted out every now and then to spew some booty chatter at Donald Trump. Because Democrats love when a Republican criticizes Donald Trump. In their little minds, and I emphasize little minds, they have this fantasy about how some MAGA somewhere is going to burn his silly little hat because a president that was about as popular as botulism decided to criticize Trump. Like, I don't get it. I really just don't. It's ironic that so many people call America a Christian nation. And, well, it's ironic for a lot of reasons. But the reason I'm talking about right here is that in a country that constantly excuses and justifies state violence, we supposedly worship a man who was murdered by the state. It's kind of funny. Speaking of violence and speaking of Jesus, I can't help but think about Mel Gibson's unwatchable slog of a film, The Passion of the Christ. One of the most brutally violent films you'll ever see. And it made oceans of money because Christians flocked to it, eager to watch their Savior get flayed and beaten and stabbed and mocked and spat on and thorns digging into his skull and nails pounded through his flesh. You know, and they watched all that and they just loved it. Hey, you know that guy who told us all to live in peace and to love one another? Let's go see the movie where he gets fucking destroyed. Where he gets ripped apart. You know, like, what? What a fucking joke. This country, man, you gotta love it. It's so bad, it's good. Just like killer clowns from outer space. I think a lot of Christians secretly enjoy the torture of Christ. They endlessly talk about having a personal relationship with Jesus. And they endlessly talk about how he suffered for them, you know? About how his pain was necessary and meaningful and beautiful. And to me, that's not how someone talks about their God. That's how a leather daddy talks about his gimp. You know what I mean? I knew there were some crying eyes in the house when I saw The Passion of the Christ. But I can't help but wonder if maybe there was some moisture coming from other areas as well. You know, I probably should have checked the theater seats after the showing to see if I could find any puddles. Oh, I spilled my Diet Coke. Sure you did, Pamela. Sure you did. Eros and Thanatos. Sex and death. The force of creation, the force of destruction. Opposite, but similar in some ways, you know. Both involve bodily fluids, right? Both involve screaming. A lot of times even screaming the same phrases. Oh, shit! Oh, shit! Oh, God! Oh, God! Both involve a moment of surrender. Oh. Both are escapes. But the most interesting similarity between the two things, and the most relevant to whatever the topic is here, is that both of them are ingrained very deeply into human nature. And I love seeing how those instincts of sex and death play out in different contexts. It's fascinating. And it gets back to the heart of this rant, if this rant has a heart, which is the idea of the true self, or at least the truest self, the reflexive self, the base self, the self that acts before the constructed self can kick in and assert control and take the reins. And a lot of times those moments are made of sex and death. Even my moment where I saw the Goodyear blimp and thought, oh, aliens, you know? There are erotic and violent connotations to aliens. After all, the top two things that aliens are known for, arguably, I guess, are anal probes, which I think falls neatly under the category of Eros, and invasions, which of course falls under the category of Thanatos. Maybe if I'd thought the blimp was a UFO for a split second longer, my mind would have ventured to the probes, right? I'd have thought to myself, like, ooh, abduct me, space daddy. Ooh, that table looks so cold and sterile. You gonna put me on that? Ooh, I don't know if that probe will fit. It's awful big. Sorry. It's probably disturbing to many of you. Anyway, what an odd species we are. You know? I know that because I'm part of it, and I'm rather odd, I might say, you know, if you look at me from a certain point of view. And I look at those of you who are supposedly less odd than me, and a lot of times what I see is that I see odd people that are trying to rebel against how odd they are. And doing a really shitty job, by the way. Most of you don't... You ain't got me fooled. I'm just gonna say it. You do a really bad job at concealing what fucking weirdos you are deep down inside. You might as well just tattoo all of your neuroses to your fucking foreheads. That's how transparent it is to me, bitch. Luckily for you, all the other pretenders out there, as a mutual courtesy to you, pretend to believe you in exchange for you pretending to believe them when they put on their little act of, I'm a normal, well-adjusted person. No such thing, bitch. And you can tell exactly what kind of odd they are based on the nature of their overcompensation. Whatever they claim to hate the most, that's what they either secretly are or secretly want, you know? Whatever behavior they condemn the most vociferously, that's what they secretly are doing or at least want to do. Like someone who constantly goes on and on about how their race is superior, you know? They just feel individually inferior. They got nothing else to latch on to make them feel good about themselves. They can't point to any accomplishments or anything that actually makes them special or unique, so they gotta fucking say, oh, well, my race is superior. Shut up about your damn race, you dumb fuck. You're an imbecile. You don't get to piggyback on the accomplishments of a frickin' goddamn entire race. Who cares? Even if your race is superior, you're still a moron. So who gives a shit? What about these people, these homophobes, you know? Oh, I hate homosexuals. Yeah, because you are one. And you don't accept yourself. That's all that is. Someone who is rallying constantly against abortion. They're just pissed that they had kids. They regret it. And they don't want to see anyone else not make that terrible mistake because they don't want to suffer alone because misery loves company. Haggard ass motherfuckers. Think about these incels. What do they want the most? Women. What do they hate the most? Women. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everyone that hates something is secretly in love with it. What I'm talking about is when they have an obsessive fixation kind of hatred with something. That's when you know there's something else going on. You hate this entirely too much. Usually what's going on is that they either secretly, love the thing that they claim to hate, or they resent its power over them in some way, right? And they just lack the courage to express the thing, or it contradicts some part of their cultural constructed identity, and it's like, I can't be gay, I'm a Christian. It's like, well, you are, I don't tell you. Here's a picture of a dick, you like it? Okay, you're gay. Sorry. That's life. All these people, trying to rebel against the truth of themselves. And for what? What is it all for? For the approval of a bunch of other liars. I gotta lie about who I am so the other people who are lying about who they are will accept me into the liars club. Fuck off, man. Losers. Every one of you. How drab. How drab. That's what I think about that. I think it's drab and insipid and banal and boring and tedious and lame. The worst thing about human beings is not that we're violent or perverse or even that we're hypocritical. The worst thing about human beings, as far as I am concerned, is that we're so damn sensitive about what other people think of us. And don't fucking give me this shit about how you don't give a fuck. You don't care. I don't care what other people think. Go to a Hell's Angel. Find you a Hell's Angel. And call him a weak little pussy bitch. If you're lucky enough to survive when you wake up in the hospital, recovering from your 18 stab wounds to the face, you can contemplate, why did he care so much that I called him a pussy? He doesn't know me. I'm just some random schlub. He's clearly not a pussy. He beat the shit out of me. He nearly killed me. So why did he care? Why did that biker care you call him a pussy? If you think about it, which you should, it was kind of a compliment that he did that. Because it shows you that he cares what you think. Which is why he went to such lengths to prove you wrong. To disabuse you of your erroneous notion with a practical example by demonstrating to you just how tough he is. And the fact that he cared so much, ironically, does kind of make him a little bit of a pussy. But it's okay, because we're all pussies in this regard. This is just a way, even sociopaths care what others think. People who don't care if you are suffering or if you're dying, they don't care they don't care if your soul is broken. They don't care if you're miserable. They don't care if, ants are eating your eyes. They just don't care. But they still care what you think about them. That's why sociopaths are so often charmers and manipulators and all that stuff, because they're studying you. They're reflecting back the version of themselves that they think you're going to admire and fear and whatever they're looking for out of you. They want to know how to get it. And they all want you to feel some way about them. And that's kind of crazy. Like, think of that. Even a person who is entirely devoid of empathy is still, on some fundamental level, concerned with what you think of them. Kind of crazy. People don't like when what you think of them is contrary to their own self-image. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with insecurity, because on some level, they suspect that their self-image, or at least aspects of it, are a lie. A lie they tell themselves. So when you challenge that lie, you're speaking on behalf of their insecurities, their nagging little, self-doubts. And if you want to make someone upset, then make them doubt their identity. Easiest way. If they think they're smart, make them feel stupid. If they think they're talented at something, insult their skill. If they think that they're righteous, cast them as the villain. Easiest way to do it. Of course, the more certain they are in their identity, the more difficult it'll be to make them doubt it. But you can do a little exploratory needling and digging. Carefully place remarks challenging different aspects of their identity in subtle ways that you could play off as, oh, I was just a casual con, I didn't really mean nothing by it. But you look for their weaknesses systematically, like the raptors attacking the electric fence in Jurassic Park, you know? And if you play that little game for long enough, you're bound to discover what their insecurities really are. And then you can hold on to that information for when you need it. The object here is not just to toy with people for the satisfaction of your own ego, but to know how to play someone if and when it'll become advantageous. If you need someone to do something for you, for instance, you know, you got to figure out a way to frame their action as something that proves that their insecurities are false. For example, let's say you need them to walk your dog when you're out of town. You know, you're going on a trip, you don't want to pay someone to walk the dog, you want to get this sap to do it. But you know that they're like loath to make such a commitment. But you also know, thanks to your little fishing expeditions, that they're insecure about their ability to live up to their ambitions in the area of, let's say, like business. They're a small business owner and they want to grow, but they're not really sure if they got the gravitas to do it or whatever. Now, the two things do not seem inherently related, but you can always find a commonality. So you start the conversation with them about business, and you segue the conversation into, like, what traits are important in business. And you make sure to stress reliability. And you get them to agree that reliability is a very important trait to have in the business world. Right? And once you've done that, then you bring up, hey man, you mind walking my dog while I'm out of town? Now, if they are a lot of people will not realize they're being manipulated. You know, you might fear that they will. They won't, for the most part. But even if they do, the position you put them in is the same. You've already got them to agree that reliability is an important trait for a business person, and you know that that's what they're trying to accomplish. So now, if they say no to walking your dog, it makes them seem like they're unreliable. It plays right into their insecurity. So they're bound to say, yeah, I'll walk your dog for you, man. Even if they know you're fucking manipulating them. In fact, sometimes a person that knows they're being manipulated is actually a little easier to manipulate. Because you don't have to bother being all that crafty with them. If they know that you're fucking manipulative and they know that you're going to manipulate them, you can just cut to the damn chase and just be like, hey, you ain't reliable unless you walk my fucking dog. And if you act whimsical and intriguing enough while you're doing all this stuff, give them a subtle wink and a nod and, you know, do a little dance. Come across as somewhat charming and roguish. People love a scoundrel, baby. One thing I always tell narcissistic people is, you're born with the natural talent of intuitively understanding what motivates people, because that's what makes a good manipulator. But you should use that to make people feel better about themselves, rather than tearing them down. I feel like the reason a lot of narcissists get a bad rap is because a lot of them function in the capacity of tearing somebody down to make them easier to control. And that technique does work for a time. But all you really control at that point is a weak person with no confidence. And underneath their compliance is just seething resentment. And to me, that just seems like a silly way to do things. Building people up, I think, is a much more effective tactic. Now, you may not be able to control them like a puppet, but you're going to have much more competent and confident and motivated and useful people that are, in your peer group, as allies. And instead of hating you and resenting you, they'll like you. Why wouldn't they? You make them feel good about themselves. You don't reinforce their insecurities. You give them the tools to combat their insecurities. And that's much more beneficial for everybody involved. You get a useful ally, they get uplifted, and they got, you're an encouraging friend. It's a win-win. Even if you do sometimes, trick them into walking your dog for you. Because you're still a manipulator at that point. But, let's look at what you're doing without the stigma of the word for a second. You're identifying their insecurities and self-doubts, which is really just a form of getting to know them as a person. And then you're using that knowledge to help them bolster their self-image and dispel those insecurities. And are you getting something out of it? Of course you are, sure. But they're also getting something out of it too. So there's a nice little give and take, a little transaction there. And, but therein lies the rub with it, because you have then the problem of reciprocity. If they do nice things for you, eventually they're going to be able to use it to get you to do something for them, right? Because no matter how much people claim that their relationships, whether, romantic or platonic or whatever, are not transactional, they are. You don't get something for nothing. I think that's why so many narcissists use the tear down method. Because someone with a low self-image is way too timid to expect reasonable reciprocity in their relationships. But someone with a strong self-image is going to have that expectation. And if you're like me, doing a favor for somebody else is kind of like dragging an anchor up a mountain, all right? It's just an unpleasant, strenuous activity. You'd pretty much rather be doing anything else. That's why you just have to keep the big picture in your mind, Doing something kind for them is an investment, because now they owe you. And even if people act like they don't look at things that way, they fucking do, okay? And if you don't believe me, try this one out. Next time a friend asks for a favor, just deny them. Don't even give them a reason. Just be like, I'm not doing it. I refuse to do it. Watch what happens. Because inevitably, they're going to start bringing up all the stuff they've done for you. If it's an important favor, they might even, I thought you were my friend, dude. They'll question the very nature of friendship. Because no one helps others out with the expectation of nothing in return. Unless such acts of, charitability are part of their self-image, like they like the idea of themselves as this charitable, selfless, humble person. And then it's actually really easy to pay those people back. All you got to do is just fillet them over how generous they are. Wow, you're so kind, you're so selfless, you're so generous. And they'd be like, oh, no, anyone would do it. I do, please, no. Meanwhile, inside, they're gobbling that shit up. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it at all. For a lot of people, I think viewing human relationships as, transactional feels kind of cold or cynical or something. They have a very romantic idea about human interactions, They want to feel like there is some sort of ineffable, like, soul connection between themselves and others. Something that defies rational cognition and transcends, the balance sheets of give and take. But as far as I'm concerned, their most profound error is the belief that there is something low and distasteful about seeing relationships through a transactional lens. Like, why? What's wrong with that? What's so lowly and wrong about the simple and pragmatic connections we share with one another, huh? Michael likes Kyle because he's a good conversationalist. Kyle likes Michael because he gives good advice. Like, so what? Why is that so rotten and low? Like, why do they have to just have this magical connection based on nothing? The basic affection they have for one another is essentially the same. So why do we have to, why does viewing it honestly supposedly cheapen it? That's what I want to know. Why do we humans got to place such pomp and circumstance around things? Like, nobody likes a useless person. No one likes a detrimental person. If someone never lifts a finger to help anybody else, they're thought of as a selfish fucking prick. If someone's a backstabber or a thief or even just a bore, we don't want to spend time with that person. Doesn't that alone prove that relationships are transactional? Because if our relationships came from some deeper soul connection, whatever you want to call it, and they're not based on transactions at all, then the miserable, thieving piece of shit that won't ever help you do a damn thing and doesn't really care about you, that person would have just as many friends as anybody else. And in real life, people like that, by and large, unless they got like a little bit of craft and cunning to them, are just miserable and lonely and sad and pathetic. Because no one wants to hang out with someone that doesn't bring anything to the table. Because relationships are transactional, folks. They just fucking are. And they should be. They goddamn should be. It's a good thing that they are. Otherwise, you might find yourself being inexplicably best friends with someone that's fucking boring and horrible. I don't know, I just have this connection. It's like a nightmare. It's like a horror movie. Now, I guess occasionally those characters that are just, the useless fucking clods do have some appeal to somebody, but it's usually someone who just has a perverse need to feel superior to someone else, you know? So they latch on to some useless clod and play the role of savior. You know, I guess how better to feel superior than to latch on to someone who's clearly inferior to basically everybody. Personally, I think that dynamic is repulsive, but different people have different needs and whatever. You know, you do you. But let's not forget why we're here. Let's not forget what this is all about. This rant. It's about the truest self. The reflexive self. Remember that? From like 20 years ago? Which means that when you're bolstering someone else's self-esteem, what you're really doing is being their ally in their own battle against their reflexive self, their deeper self, their base self. You're helping to delude them, essentially. Because let's be honest about something that's pretty painful, I think. Our insecurities are all true. Or at least they have some basis in experience, right? Like the woman that worries that she's overweight is overweight. The man who worries he might not be as intelligent and cerebral as he thinks he is, well, he probably isn't. The teenager who worries that he might be gay, he's probably gay. Now, even in the instances where our insecurities don't reflect like our present reality, they're usually related to either some past reality that we haven't fully let go of yet, or they're related to some trauma, someone else made us feel a certain way and we've never let go of that fully or whatever the fuck. But like, all of our insecurities have a basis somewhere. They're not just these completely irrational things that are unconnected to anything in reality. Which I think some people do tend to view them that way. When you identify a flaw in yourself, you have a decision to make. And as far as I can tell you, there's three options. There's the option of self-deceit, which we've been talking about. There's the option of accepting it. Okay, I have this flaw. I accept it. I'm going to let go of the negative feelings I have about it, Or there's overcoming it, which is, usually difficult, sometimes impossible. Of course, not all insecurity. I guess the word flaw maybe is not the best word because, not all insecurities are stem from things that are actually flaws. Like being gay is not a flaw. But there are a lot of people in this world that will make you feel like it is, which is why it can still be a source of insecurity. And people will go into such, denial about the trait that they will live their entire lives as if they were straight. They'll go get opposite sex partners, even have kids, and join the church and whatever the fuck else, it's live a fake life. Live as if they're straight. Live as if they're something they aren't, It's like fake it till you make it, but you never make it, And of course, to overcompensate, a lot of times these closeted gay men, and it's usually men, not always, usually. A lot of times these closeted gay men will adopt, homophobic personalities in order to be perceived as not gay. They'll adopt the mentality of I hate gays. And that kind of serves two purposes for those people. First of all, it signals, how not gay they are. Although I think a lot of people see through that shit. But on the other hand, and I think this is actually a lot of times the bigger reason that we never talk about, is that it gives them an excuse to fixate on, gayness, on homosexuality, Like hate and love, they're opposite in a lot of ways, but one way in which they're similar is that they both involve emotionally fixating on something. So I think that for a lot of closeted gay men masquerading as homophobes, as gay haters, gives them the opportunity to fixate on gay men and gay sex and gay culture, all of these repressed desires within them without having to admit the real reason that they're so obsessed. Some homophobe can rage about the gay agenda or men in dresses or whatever the freaking current dog whistle, cultural war hustler bullshit is. And meanwhile, he's attentively cataloging every detail. Ooh, this guy wore a dress. Better show this to all my friends so that they too can be outraged, So it's really just a way of maintaining the obsession, but maintaining it in a way that's acceptable to their weird peer group of liars. So when you start to interrogate yourself about your insecurities, there's a lot of things you got to ask yourself. Is the origin of this insecurity a flaw that I have now, or does it linger from some previous state? Is the origin of this insecurity from trauma? Or is it from some sort of conditioning that played a role? Is it, cultural? And is this flaw actually a flaw? Did that very same culture that instilled me with the flaw also teach me that it was a flaw? Is this flaw actually a flaw, or have I been brainwashed? And then you got to ask yourself how to deal with it. Can it be overcome? Can it be accepted? Or do you have to engage in some sort of self-deceit? Which I think is what most people end up choosing because, they don't examine these things super often. I think the best thing you can do for yourself, however you choose to handle it, is to surround yourself with people who are enablers of your approach. Avoid people who act as obstacles to it. And the best thing you could do for others is to be supportive of, the way that they want to handle their own shit. But, occasionally you're going to be faced with the question of maybe have they chosen wrong? Like, what if they have accepted a flaw that, in your opinion, they should have overcome? Well, then you have a choice to make. You can either leave them to their own devices, or you can try to change them. And in most cases, I would say I endorse the former. I think we have to resist the urge to try to change people in fundamental ways. They got to come to that shit themselves. And of their own desire and volition. If you decide that you truly want to change someone in some regard, for whatever reason, I would recommend approaching it very patiently and very gently, and be open about the fact that you're trying to do it. Don't use sneaky tactics. Let them know, hey, I noticed that you do this. I think maybe you might want to consider changing that behavior. And if you don't, whatever, we're still friends or we're still whatever. But it's just been my observation that maybe this behavior isn't good for you or whatever. I think it's more of a, you want more soft nudges than hard pushes on that one. But you can do it the other way. And for this, I don't know if you've ever watched an episode of Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay, but Gordon Ramsay he basically goes into these restaurants, he completely shatters the self-worth of everyone that owns the restaurant or works the restaurant, and then rebuilds them in his own image. Like, he's basically just blunt force manipulation. And then, once they're just desperate fiends for his approval, he gives it to them on the condition that they obey every edict that he issues to them. He's basically just showing you like a speed run of the worst narcissistic manipulation tactics of the most abusive narcissist you could imagine. But, it is effective. But I would wager that in many instances, those people probably revert back to themselves shortly after he's gone and the cameras are no longer rolling because he's not there to maintain it. He has no interest in long-term control of those people. He's just trying to make an entertaining TV show, which, of course, he did. I love the show. It's fascinating to watch. But there is such a thing as tough love, of course. The idea that you got to tear someone down at least a little bit to get them to confront their problematic behaviors, right? But my issue with that is, no matter how much you think you've ascertained their psychological nature, you don't really know what their internal experiences are. And you don't really, just because you think you've figured things out, like, oh, I've solved the little Rubik's Cube of their mind. You haven't necessarily. You might pull a support beam thinking it's holding up one thing and find out it was actually holding up something else. If you're going to go monkeying around with someone's psyche, I don't know. I just don't think you should. I think you should leave it alone. Even if you're trying to do something that you think is for their benefit, I think you should just leave them the fuck alone. And if you really have to address it, I would say do it the way I just told you to. Be direct. Don't be manipulative. Be honest and forthcoming about it, and work with them if they show interest in changing. And if they don't, then let them be. And the reason why, I think, is because if you're trying, you need to look at your own motivation, is what I'm trying to say here. Because if you're trying to change someone for your own benefit, like, are you like, even if you think because you might say to yourself, I want to change them for their own good. But you really have to ask yourself, is it really for their own good, or am I bullshitting myself and it's really for my good? Because if it's really for your good, if you're trying to change them to benefit you, then what you're doing at that point is not really transactional anymore. It's more parasitic. I think you need to be very careful when you approach the attempt to change someone else. There's a number of considerations you got to examine very fucking carefully. Because this is a lot bigger than just like that base level manipulation. Like, oh, I'm going to trick them into walking my dog or something like that. Like, this is trying to change some fundamental aspect of their nature. And you probably don't know what you're doing. And you're probably going to fuck it up. Now, maybe you are a sociopath watching this. And if you are, no judgment. That's fine. You know, you can't help your nature. But you may be asking yourself, well, why should I obey that edict? Why should I not, I don't care if I do some damage to them, whatever. I have no regard for them. I have no regard for the emotional states of others. That's what makes me a sociopath. That's what gives me my superpowers. So you think you're free from the encumberment, and look, all I can say to you is that realistically looking at the world, I see that there are people out there who behave in exactly the manner I'm advising against who prosper. And, Donald Trump, as tedious as he is to talk about, is like such a prime example. He's the perfect example of this, so we got to talk about him because he's a guy, he's loyal to nobody. He's viciously cruel at the drop of a hat. He's he's like the textbook narcissistic user and abuser, what has he got to show for it? Vast fortune, legions of sycophants, power beyond measure. That's what he gets for, doing exactly what I just told you not to do. But you got to consider this. I want you to really look at Trump beyond the externalities. And realize that Trump is not satisfied with any of it. That's why he puts his name on building after building. He slaps his face on a fucking coin. He throws himself a military parade. He sues anyone that has ever slighted him, He gets pissed if you say his crowds ain't big enough. He rewrites historical events to make himself the hero of the story, He's got all the material and even social things that a lot of people aspire to. The fortune and the power and the influence and the sycophants and the ass kissers and the brown nosers. But the thing is, he's still starving. And he's starving because he's a parasite. He's a world-class parasite. He's one of the best parasites probably in human history, but still a parasite. And let's think about fundamentally what a parasite is. It's a creature that cannot sustain itself. It relies on a host. It can't exist on its own. You cut off the host, the parasite withers up and dies, right? So, no matter how successful or, prosperous the parasite might become, it's always going to be fundamentally weak on its own. And that's why when I look at the Trump story, I don't see a narrative of success for Trump. I see a narrative of failure for America. His constant need for this external validation is something that I personally think should be looked down on with contempt. I just think, he's lowly, he's wretched, he's a fucking worm. He's pawn scum. Because no matter how much power he's given, he's always going to be all of those things. They're always going to be his fundamental nature, is just parasitic worm boy, And that's why I just say, don't aspire to this power. Aspire to fulfillment. And when I say fulfillment, I'm not talking about some magical, eternal wellspring of contentment or something like that. What I'm talking about is fulfillment in the context we've been talking about here is simply transcending the need for external validation. Not necessarily transcending the desire for it. Desire is fun. Wanting something from somebody is great, especially because that's what makes it feel good when you get it. You know? But needing it is in like want and need, the chasm between those, want and need have less in common than love and hate. You know, they're more opposite. We perceive them as being close together, but they are miles apart. Miles apart. If you want to be validated for something and you aren't, that sucks. Oh, I really wanted validation, but I wasn't validated. C'est la vie. Damn, that's life. Oh well. But if you need to be validated for something and you aren't, you know, then life is over. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, you just implode. Psychologically, you fucking collapse. You become nothing. Actually, let's be clear on this. You didn't become nothing. You realized that you were always nothing. Because no matter how much power and prestige you gather, if you need it, then you're nothing. Acquire out of want, not out of need. If you ever sense need in yourself, destroy it before it destroys you. Like, you cannot allow yourself to need. And if you walk away from this rant with nothing else I've said, walk away with that. Retain that. Do not need. Obviously, if there's some pedantic smartass that's going to be like, oh, everyone needs something. You need oxygen. Fuck off, bitch. Get out of here with that shit. You know what I'm talking about. Don't be so literal. Anyway, that's the story of the time I thought the Goodyear blimp was a UFO. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, then do me a favor and spread it around. Tell your friends about it. Tell your enemies about it. Just put it wherever you want. Put it on social media or something. I don't give a shit. Put it somewhere. I mean, if you want to help, that's the easiest way to help. Look, other things help too. You want to give a thumbs up, you want to give it a comment. Those things are great. Helps with the algorithm. The fact that you're even watching this video at this point still is great for me because that means your watch time is through the roof. But if you really want to help, that's a great way to do it, is spread around, share it around, talk to people about it. And I put my Etsy store in the description. I do have some paintings on sale. If you want to buy one, that'd be great. I have several on sale now, and I'm also doing some commission slots as well, if you'd like to get something custom. Until then, I am Fray the Chaos Wizard saying peace the fuck.